I'm going to make the case here that the two most important aspects of an ACL reconditioning program are sprinting and plyometrics. And today I'm going to talk about why plyometrics are the unsung hero of your ACL rehab journey. My name is Joe Galeko, and I have over a decade of experience in helping athletes return to sport after ACL injuries using methods like sprinting and plyometrics. So if you've ever torn your ACL, you know the road back to the field and competition is long and arduous. So throughout your rehab journey, you're going to do a ton of physical therapy, traditional strength training, and running. Those things are important. They're important components of a comprehensive rehab program. However, they leave a lot of things to be desired and a lot of things missing in a comprehensive rehab program. I'm going to make the case here that the two most important aspects of an ACL reconditioning program are sprinting and plyometrics. And today I'm going to talk about why plyometrics are the unsung hero of your ACL rehab journey. Okay, so let's start with the basics and a quick primer on plyometrics. What are they? And why are they so important? In plyometrics, you have three actions. You have a loading phase, which we call the eccentric phase. You have an amortization phase or a coupling phase, which is the amount of time that you spend on the ground. And then you have a concentric power phase, or you have an explosive phase. So essentially, when you run, you're going to be in flight. And every time your foot contacts the ground, you're going to have a loading phase, a pause, and then a push-out phase. Now, plyometrics are so valuable because of those three phases. Plyometrics are one of the most important and powerful ways to train the dynamic actions of sport because they require all three of those phases, and they train them in a very intense manner. All plyometrics have a couple of characteristics. The first is that they all involve a loading phase. The second is that the amount of time that you spend on the ground is very rapid. So this is indicative of sport-specific movements like sprinting, change of direction, jumping, cutting, etc., etc. So because sport is so plyometric in nature, plyometrics are going to be the conduit or the bridge in between basic things that you do in rehab like strength training and running and the dynamic actions of sport. It's the glue. It's that important that they take center stage in the rehab process. So plyometric training is so effective for ACL rehabbers because they provide three critical aspects in training. The first one is that they improve muscular power, and power is our ability to produce force as quickly as possible, such as all the explosive movements that are required in soccer. The second thing is that they improve our tendon elasticity, so our tendon's ability to absorb force and act as a rubber band or a giant spring and help us produce explosive actions as well. Plyometrics improve our ability to store and release energy in our tendons. And then the last piece is our tolerance to load, or our force tolerance. They teach us how to better tolerate and accept forces so that we can decelerate quickly and withstand the extreme amount of forces that probably got us injured in the first place. And one way I like to think about plyometrics is that they're the bridge in between walking and sprinting, which is a large gap in between there. There's going to be some jogging in between there. There might be some water running. There might be some strides, and then there might be full-on sprinting. However, I believe that plyometrics are going to be the glue, like I said earlier, to low-intensity movements like walking and jogging and really high-intensity movements like sprinting and changing direction at full speed. We need plyometrics in there to prepare our tissues to be able to tolerate the extreme forces and loads that come with sport-specific actions. In the early stages of rehab, our primary objectives are going to be to restore range of motion, get out of pain, reduce swelling, regain function and gait, and gain some, foundational strength, if that makes sense. However, we can't just continue to do traditional strength work in the gym and expect to be prepared for the dynamic actions of sport. This is where plyometrics have to come into play and have to take center stage in the rehab process. So why are plyometrics so effective at doing this? True plyometrics, really intense ones that we might program in the weight room but also on the field, are going to expose your knee to forces and rates of stretch that are much greater than anything that we can replicate in the weight room. Plyos essentially create high loads or mechanical tension at high speeds. So high forces and high speeds, just like sport, just like changing direction, just like sprinting, just like jumping, cutting, and landing. Now, all this is facilitated by a powerful neurological adaptation. Inside of your tendons and your muscle cells, you have this wonderful little organ called the Golgi tendon organ, or the GTO. Now, this organ serves as a force inhibitor for you. It's essentially a governor or a light tap on the brake pedal every time that your muscles and tendons experience really, really high forces. If we're not prepared for those forces, then the Golgi tendon organ is going to continue to put our foot down on the brake pedal to prevent us from experiencing muscular tensions that could get us injured. This is where plyometrics come in. The purpose of plyometrics is to stimulate and desensitize the Golgi tendon organ in our muscles and our tendons in order for us to take the governor off of our brain, off of our central nervous system, and our foot off of the gas pedal to allow us to accept more forces, lots and lots of force, to accept high rates of stretch, and to produce lots of power. So the more plyometrics that we do, the more we desensitize the Golgi tendon organ, those little tiny organs in our muscles and tendons that tell us to slow down. We can desensitize those by doing lots of plyometrics to say, actually, it's okay to experience these forces. I want you to speed up and be really, really powerful. So even though plyometrics might seem aggressive and oftentimes dangerous, they're actually protective and they're actually a safety measure for athletes returning from ACL injuries because we're able to produce lots of power and high forces in a controlled training environment, desensitize those Golgi tendon organs, and then put you back on the field ready for all of the randomness and chaos that comes throughout the competition. So just to recap that little physiology lesson on plyometrics is that plyometrics serve two important purposes for us. Number one, they desensitize the governor in our muscles and tendons that tell us to slow down so that we can accept and produce more force. And the second thing that they do is they directly target the stretch-shortening cycle. We talked about earlier, the stretch-shortening cycle is that three-part movement system in which we have a loading phase, a pause, and then an explosive power phase. The plyometrics are going to help train the stretch-shortening cycle so that our muscles and tendons can respond quicker when we want them to. So what are some examples of some really powerful plyometrics that we use in our ACL reconditioning program? The first one, and probably most important, is hops. Hopping is the plyometric that looks and feels the most like sprinting. A hop is essentially left leg to left leg to left leg. We can do these for height, we can do these for distance, we can do these for speed, but they're a very powerful performance enhancer, but they're also an advanced plyometric. Second one is bounds. A bound is like a hop, except you're jumping from leg to leg for max distance. So bounds are an extremely powerful way to improve the magnitude or the amount of force that we can put into the ground. And they help put tons of force through the knee joint to help prepare us for the forces of sprinting and changing direction later on in the program. Another one of my favorite exercises, often done in the weight room, is the depth jump, the versatile depth jump. The depth jump is one of the most powerful plyometrics because it's one of the easiest ways to overload the Golgi tendon organ to be able to produce all of those sweet, sweet adaptations that we talked about earlier. Some other examples include lateral bounds, scissor bounds, pogo jumps, and hurdle jumps. All of these exercises challenge the athletes in unique ways, and they're all highly progressive. So we can start athletes from the bottom of this progression system and work their way up in intensity all the way until we get up to the really, really high level plyometrics like depth jumping or broad jumps for distance or bounds for distance or hops for speed. By the time we get to those, we can safely assume that we're putting enough force through each leg to be able to sprint at maximal speeds, and then we can use the most powerful exercise for performance enhancement and rehabilitation, sprinting, to be able to get athletes back to the field fitter and faster. So if you like this content, like and subscribe, where we talk about plyometrics and other powerful methods for getting athletes back to the field after ACL injuries quicker. Thank you. See you next time.